Picture it, India, 1875. Hot summer nights, the smell of spices in the air, the ominous rustle of a snake slithering through the huts, and the terrified screams of villagers. That's right. We're talking about those nightmare machines that strike fear into the hearts of millions. Yes, we're talking about cobras. But these guys are not your run-of-the-mill garden variety snake. Oh no, these are Indian cobras, hooded cobras, spitting cobras, deadly enough to end a human life in a matter of minutes. Now fast forward to today. The problem still persists. Cobra attacks still make headlines, and their venom is still among the deadliest in the world. But here's the catch. Back in the 19th century, Britain ruled India, and they had a big problem. See, those pesky cobras, they weren't just slithering into villages, they were also showing up in major cities. Places like Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, they were overrun with cobras, especially after dark. And these snakes weren't just hanging out in the shadows. No, they were causing chaos, biting people, disrupting trade, and generally being a huge nuisance. So the British officials, bless their cotton socks, they decided to take matters into their own hands. They came up with what they thought was the best plan since sliced bread. A plan so clever it would make Charles Darwin proud. They would pay people to hunt down these snakes. Specifically, they offered a hefty bounty for every dead cobra brought in. Now this was supposed to be the perfect solution. After all, why wouldn't it work? By putting some cash in people's pockets, they would incentivize folks to go out and find snakes and get rid of them once and for all. Sounds logical, right? Well, here's where things took a turn. The British officials were scratching their heads in delight. The plan was working like a charm. Cobra numbers were dropping and everyone was happy. Or were they? Unbeknownst to the authorities, something else was happening. Something that would make that famous economist, Thomas Malthus, blush. You see, while the number of cobras killed and claimed a reward was going up, so was the number of cobras being born. Yes, it turns out that killing off the snakes wasn't as effective as the British hoped. In fact, it did the exact opposite. Here's what was happening. As soon as the reward program got going, some sharp individuals realized there was a way to make a quick buck. Instead of just catching and killing snakes, they started breeding them. That's right. They created little snake factories, breeding them like rabbits and then cashing in on the rewards. It was an underground operation, hidden from the prying eyes of the British Raj, but it didn't take long for word to spread. Soon there were so many people breeding snakes that the black market for baby cobras was booming. It was like the Wild West, but instead of gold, they were panning for snake oil. Now you might be wondering, why didn't the authorities crack down on these snake breeders? Well, here's the thing. The plan was working, or so the officials thought. The number of cobras in the cities was going down, so they were happy as pigs in muck. It wasn't until much later that they realized they had been had, that the entire system was built on a house of cards and snakeskin. By that time, though, it was too late. The cobra breeding industry was in full swing, and the authorities couldn't just stop it without causing chaos. So they did the only thing they could do. They paid out the rewards and hoped for the best. What happened next was nothing short of cobra chaos. As soon as the breeding operations realized the game was up, they did something that would make any animal rights activist faint dead away. They set the snakes free. That's right. They opened the snake boxes, waved goodbye to their scaly little friends, and let them loose in the wild. And let me tell you, they didn't hold back. It was a cobra free-for-all. All of a sudden, there were more snakes in the streets than ever before, and the British officials were back to square one. Their plan to control the cobra population had backfired spectacularly. Not only did they fail to reduce the number of snakes, but they also caused a cobra explosion. Talk about an unintended consequence. This whole fiasco was such a disaster that it became a case study in unintended consequences and gave rise to a term that has become a staple in economics and policy making, the Cobra Effect. It's a term used to describe situations where a solution to a problem ends up making the problem worse. And let me tell you, it's a phenomenon that has reared its ugly head, time and time again throughout history. Now I know what you're thinking. Cobras, really? Can't we talk about something a bit more, relatable? Well, buckle up, my friend, because we're just getting started. The Cobra Effect isn't just about snakes, it's about human behavior. It's a lesson in how good intentions can lead to disastrous outcomes when incentives are unaligned with reality. Let's take, for example, the war on drugs. In the 1970s and 80s, US policymakers got tough on drugs. They wanted to stop the flow of narcotics into the country and punish those who dealt or used them. So they passed laws that imposed harsh penalties on drug offenders, especially those convicted of selling drugs. Sounds like a great idea with the best of intentions, but what actually happened? Well, as it turns out, the war on drugs had an unintended consequence. It led to a massive increase in the number of people incarcerated in the United States. You see, while the policy was meant to target drug kingpins and street dealers, it ended up ensnaring a lot of small-time offenders. People caught in possession of small amounts of drugs were suddenly facing the same penalties as major drug traffickers. And guess what? This created a huge incentive for law enforcement to crack down on low-level offenders. Suddenly, police departments across the country were under pressure to make arrests and keep those arrest numbers high. It didn't matter if the offenses were minor. The goal was to put as many people behind bars as possible. Pretty soon, entire communities were being decimated by mass incarceration. Families were torn apart and lives were ruined. All because a policy designed to combat drugs ended up creating a whole new set of problems. Just like the British with their Cobra bounty, policymakers failed to account for one crucial detail: human behavior. They had created a system where the incentives were misaligned and the results were disastrous. But don't worry, the Cobra Effect doesn't just strike in the world of politics. It can happen anywhere, even in the world of business. Take, for instance, the case of the coal company. In the early 2000s, a major coal company was looking to boost its production and cut costs. They turned to technology to help them achieve their goal. They installed sensors in coal mines that would monitor the amount of coal being extracted. Then they did something crazy. They offered bonuses to the mine managers based on how much coal was extracted. Sounds like a great way to motivate employees and boost production, right? Well, here's where things took a turn. You see, those sensors weren't 100% accurate. Sometimes they overestimated the amount of coal being extracted. And here's where the Cobra Effect reared its ugly head. Those mine managers had a strong incentive to fudge the numbers. If the sensor said 10 tons of coal had been extracted, they would simply report 12 tons. That way they would get a bigger bonus for the same amount of work. Pretty soon the company was paying out millions of dollars in bonuses for coal that wasn't even mined. And let's face it, when it comes to coal mining, safety is paramount. But when managers are incentivized to boost production, safety takes a back seat. Suddenly, miners are working in dangerous conditions and accidents are on the rise, all because a company trying to boost production and cut costs ended up creating a system where the incentives were misaligned. The Cobra Effect was in full swing and nobody was taking a bite out of the apple. But wait, it gets better. The company eventually realized what was happening and tried to fix it. They updated the sensors to make them more accurate and changed the bonus structure. But by that time, the damage was done. The Cobra Effect had struck and the company was left reeling. Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, Cobra Effect happens, but what can we do about it? Well, here's the thing. The Cobra Effect is a reminder that good intentions aren't enough. We need to be aware of the potential downsides of our actions and be willing to adapt when things go awry. That means being flexible with our policies, rethinking our strategies, and above all, listening to feedback. Because let's face it, sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees and we need a fresh pair of eyes to point out the cobras lurking in our midst. So the next time you're faced with a problem, take a step back and think about the potential consequences of your actions. Ask yourself, could this be another cobra problem in the making? Because remember, in the game of life, the cobras are always waiting for us to make a move. And it's up to us to make sure we don't play right into their slithering little hands.